Yo, so guys, welcome back to another video. This is a reaction to Dantavius, and the video is the biggest scandal in US history. They won't teach you this in school. And I like this channel a lot. I've reacted to him a couple of times, and I've watched him on my own a couple of times as well. And I like his style. I think his videos are funny, and he just kills me. And his topics are also quite interesting. He usually does like Reddit things. They're the ones that I've really watched. But yeah, so this is a little bit different to what other ones I've seen. But we're just going to jump into this. Hopefully going to enjoy. Links are in the description to my Patreon if you want to see some more of my reactions, film reactions, series reactions, music reactions are coming, YouTube reactions that can't be posted to YouTube, all that stuff. Plus people can suggest me things through there. So yeah, links are in the description to that. But let's jump into this and see this video. I do like this guy's channel a lot. So if you want to check his channel out, links in the description will be to this video and then obviously to his channel as well. So yeah.
The 1980s. What a time to be alive. Rocky IV, Van Halen, the looming threat of nuclear annihilation. The 80s had it all, baby. But one thing a lot of people don't talk about too much anymore is that the biggest scandal in American history happened in the 80s. And it involved a man who some consider to be the greatest American president, Ronald Reagan. And no, I'm not talking about the time he created AIDS to eradicate all the gay people. I'm talking about the Iran-Contra scandal. And I'm going to get into it after a quick word from our sponsor.
I have no idea what this is about.
Guys, I have a confession to make. I'm kind of a schlemiel. I dropped my phone at least...
Well, is this for a phone case? He's getting phone case. Come on, man. He's getting his money. If you're interested, this is what you can do. I mean, actually, I need a phone case, to be fair, because I've recently lost mine. Might have to actually do that as well. But yeah, if you're interested, links will be in the description and you can help him out with his sponsor and stuff. And yeah, he's getting his money. I'd love to see it.
Our story starts back in 1951. Mohammad Mossadegh was just elected prime minister of Iran. He was extremely popular and loved by most Iranians. But you know who didn't love him? The British. See, most of Iran's oil at the time was owned by British Petroleum, aka...
Of course it's to do with oil, for God's sake,
BP.
Man.
And Mossadegh decided that he was going to nationalize all the oil. And if you know anything about England, you know they hate two things. Food that doesn't taste like ash and losing access to oil. So the UK convinced the United States that Iran was in need of some good old-fashioned freedom. And on August 19th, 1953, Mohammad Mossadegh was ousted by a CIA-backed coup and replaced with the Shah of Iran, who was more in line with Western interests. And things were going pretty good for him until 1979, but we'll come back to that later. Meanwhile, on the other side of the world, in Nicaragua, a group known as the Sandinistas were fighting to overthrow the US-backed dictator Anastasio Somoza. And on July 17th, 1979, they succeeded and took control of the government. Now, the Sandinistas were socialists backed by Cuba, and let's just say Ronald Reagan wasn't too happy about that.
The Sandinista rule is a communist reign of terror. Many of those who fought alongside the Sandinistas saw their revolution betrayed. They were denied power in the new government. Some were imprisoned, others exiled. Thousands who fought with the Sandinistas have taken up arms against them and are now called the Contras. They are freedom fighters.
That brings us to the Contra part of the Iran-Contra scandal. The Contras were a collection of right-wing paramilitary groups that opposed the Sandinista government. And Reagan had a huge boner for these guys. At one point, he even said that they were, quote, the moral equivalent of the Founding Fathers. Now, I should probably mention that the Contras were accused of pretty much every human rights abuse imaginable. Kidnapping, torture, rape, killing civilians. These guys were doing it all. So yeah, they're not exactly fucking Ben Franklins over here. And don't get me wrong, the Sandinistas were no angels themselves. But the thing with the Contras is that they didn't really have any oversight, so nobody held them accountable when they did messed up stuff. But hey man, at least they weren't a bunch of filthy commies. So the US sent them tens of millions of dollars of aid every year. But Congress thought that Reagan and the CIA were going a little too hard in Nicaragua, so they passed the Boland Amendment in 1983, which completely cut off all funds to the Contras and prohibited the CIA from carrying out any operations there. But Reagan wasn't going to let a stupid little thing like Congress stop him from helping out the Contras. But of course, he couldn't do it by himself, so Reagan started looking for somebody that could help out the Contras under Congress's nose. And it wouldn't be long before he found the perfect guy.
Congress stopped the Contra money flow just cause they moved a teeny bit of blow.
What's
but
this?
then a hero came forth, his name was Oliver North. He and Reagan went around the sissy Congress. Ollie North, Ollie North.
Lieutenant Colonel Oliver North was a decorated Marine with more medals than the fucking periodic table. You might recognize him from Call of Duty Black Ops 2.
Lieutenant Colonel North, NSC.
He was the perfect guy for the job. He had experience, he was a patriot, and most importantly, he knew how to keep his mouth shut. And our boy Ollie didn't waste any time getting to work. The first thing he did was set up these secret fundraisers where rich people could donate money to the cause. And one of the biggest donors at these things was actually Saudi Arabia, who gave over $30 million. So they were doing these fundraisers for a while, and now they had all this money. The only problem was they didn't know how they were going to buy weapons with the money without Congress knowing. That's where Richard Secord comes in. Secord was an Air Force general who had a side hustle working in the black market arms trade. One of the guys who he worked with was a fella by the name of Edwin Wilson, who was pretty much the biggest arms dealer in the world at the time. And Secord acted as a kind of middleman between Wilson and Ollie North. Well, that is until Wilson fucked around and got himself thrown into prison after he got caught selling 40 tons of explosives to Libya. As one does. When it was discovered that Secord had been working with Wilson, he was forced to retire from the Air Force. But he didn't really give a shit. Now that he had a lot more free time on his hands, he decided to start his own arms smuggling company called the Enterprise. So Secord went from being the middleman to running the whole operation in just a few short years. And you know that mother sucker was getting paid. So, the Shah of Iran took power in 1953 after a US-backed coup, as I said. And he actually did a lot of good stuff after taking over. He grew the economy, he helped modernize the country, but at the same time, he was also kind of a schmuck. He ruled with an iron fist, and while he did bring in a lot of wealth into Iran, most of it went into his pockets.
Of course.
I mean, the man literally threw a $400 million party for himself and his rich friends. A lot of people saw the Shah as a puppet of the United States who sold out his country to foreigners. And eventually the people had enough, and a revolution broke out that brought down his regime. In 1979, the Shah left Iran, and Ayatollah Khomeini took his place as supreme leader. Unlike the Shah, this guy didn't really like America very much. He referred to the U.S. as the Great Satan, and one of his favorite catchphrases was, "Death to America."
Oh,
Now,
wow.
You're probably thinking, man, it would be really dumb if we sold weapons to this guy. Yeah,
And they did.
probably, but we still did it anyway. See, back in the 80s, Islamic extremists had this weird hobby of kidnapping Americans and holding them hostage. Hezbollah, a Lebanese terrorist organization with ties to Iran, was holding 7 hostages back in 1984, and Reagan really wanted to get them out, but he didn't really know how. And then one day, Ollie North gets a call from a dude named Manouchehr Ghorbanifar, who had connections to the Iranian government.
My friend, I can get some of the hostages out. If you just do me a little favor and sell some missiles to Iran.
This was exactly the opportunity that Reagan was looking for. But there were 2 issues. 1, there was an arms embargo on Iran. And 2, Reagan had a very strict, we don't negotiate with terrorists policy.
Our government has a firm policy not to capitulate to terrorist demands.
But then Ronnie thought to himself, okay, maybe just this one time, maybe just this once we'll
Bending the rules a couple times. I mean, I guess that's just how it is, though. A lot of people in charge will do that, but
negotiate with terrorists. Just a little bit. So he told Ollie North to set the deal up. But obviously, if anybody found out about this, they would be in deep shit. So they had to get creative. That's when Bob McFarlane, Reagan's national security advisor, came up with a brilliant idea. They could just use Israel as a middleman. Israel would sell arms to Iran, and the U.S. would sell weapons back to Israel to replace whatever they sold. And if they got caught, they could just blame it on the Jews, because that always works. It was a genius plan. But why would Israel ever get on board with something like this? Like, Iran had publicly called for Israel's destruction multiple times.
Oh,
well,
wow.
Iran was fighting a war with Iraq at the time, so the Israelis figured if their 2 biggest enemies were focusing on each other, they would be less focused on them. So it was a win-win. Everybody was winning. Well, except for the civilians getting annihilated by all these wars. But hey, they were brown, so who gives a shit about it? So Ollie calls up Ghorbanifar and tells him it's a go. Now, I should mention this Ghorbanifar guy is a complete putz. Like, he's the stereotypical Persian arms dealer. Reagan called him a devious character, and Bob McFarlane said he was, quote, one of the most despicable people I have ever met. According to the National Security Archive, Ghorbanifar was almost universally discredited for misrepresenting all sides' goals and interests. Even before the Iran deals got underway, the CIA had ruled Ghorbanifar off limits for purveying bad information to U.S. intelligence. Okay, so this guy was so bad that the fucking CIA refused to work with him, and Ollie North was like, nah, he's a good guy. So Ghorbanifar set up the deal, and to everybody's surprise, it actually worked out, and Hezbollah released some of the hostages. In fact, it was going so well that they decided to cut Israel out of the operation completely. And the new system worked like this. The Department of Defense would sell missiles to the CIA. The CIA then sold those missiles to Richard Secord, who would sell them to Ghorbanifar, who sold them to Iran, at a massive markup, of course. Secord and Ghorbanifar was making so much money off this scheme that they didn't even know what to do with it all. So they decided, hey, let's toss some of this cash to the Contras. And that's where the Iran and the Contra finally meet. Wow, it took us a while to get here, but here we are. Now, on top of getting money from weapons deals and donations from the Saudi government, the Contra's biggest source of fund was actually some good old-fashioned drug trafficking. So, back in the day, there was this guy in Los Angeles named Rick Ross. No, not that Rick Ross. I'm talking about the real Rick Ross, the biggest drug dealer in America. At his peak, Rick was pulling in over $3 million a day. He made billions of dollars.
And these days as well, $3 million a day. Oh my
on the
God.
coke trade. That's billions with a B. Rick's supplier was a guy by the name of Oscar Danilo Blandón. And guess where he was from? Nicaragua. It turns out that Blandón was trafficking drugs to raise money for the Contras. And the Reagan administration knew about it the whole time.
That's mental. They literally knew about what was going on. It is interesting how they all, like, the governments or whatever, people in charge will turn a blind eye to things when they sort of want to support, when it's something that they want to sort of back and support, you know. That's so wild, because you see like the laws against drug smuggling and all that stuff, yet they know what's going on. They probably know about all these things that are going on, to be honest. I mean, there's all these like cameras now and all these ways of like tracking people. They probably know who's up to no good and stuff, like, and they maybe just wait for a time to like catch them or something like that. But that's crazy how they knew about it and they just didn't do anything about it.
So while thousands of people were being thrown into jail for drugs, our own allies were bringing tons of stuff into the country while the government turned a blind eye.
Where do you get your coke from?
I was getting my coke from a guy by the name of Oscar Danilo Blandón. Blandón would bring me drugs to sell to raise money for the Contras. The Contras was backed by the CIA. They felt that if they lost Nicaragua, that Russia would be marching down the streets of the United States.
Despite the destruction of the inner cities, the whole Iran-Contra operation was going strong. The Contras were getting their money, Iran was getting their missiles, and most importantly, everybody kept their mouths shut. For a while. October 5th, 1986, a cargo plane was shot down in Nicaragua. It was holding AK-47s, rocket launchers, grenades, and 200,000
that would have caused one big-ass explosion.
rounds of ammunition. 4 people were on board, but only one survived. Guy by the name of Gene
How did he survive that if there's grenades in it? Were they like not prepared or something? What?
Fuss, who for some reason was the only guy who thought to bring a parachute. Now, Gene was pretty low on the totem pole, so he didn't know much about the operation, but what he did know was enough to link the plane back to the Reagan administration. And just when you think it couldn't get any worse, it got worse. November 3rd, 1986. Just a month after Hassan Fuss's plane got shut down, Ashira, a Lebanese newspaper, reported that the U.S. government was trading arms for hostages after getting a tip from an Iranian official. What's funny is that it's been speculated that Ghorbanifar convinced the source to leak this story because dude was just an agent of chaos.
He just loves it. He's getting all this money. He's got rich from it. Now he's like, I'm now going to bring the whole operation down.
Either way, the whole operation was exposed and everybody involved was fucked. The American people wanted blood. They wanted justice. So Reagan created the Tower Commission, a special review board that was going to investigate the scandal and get to the bottom of the whole thing. So just to reiterate, the president opened up an investigation
on himself
into the president.
And I appointed a special review board, the Tower Board, which took on the chore of pulling the truth together for me and getting to the bottom of things.
But obviously Reagan wasn't going to take the blame himself, So Ollie North volunteered to be the fall guy. And in some way, he was always intended to be the fall guy, right from the get-go.
What?
Luckily, right after shit hit the fan, Ollie North decided to throw a little party. A shredding party. Ollie and his secretary got together and destroyed every single piece of evidence related to Iran-Contra. Also, he was definitely hitting that.
I shredded. I was never told not to shred. I shredded because I thought it was the right thing to do. When I didn't have a shredder, I put it in a burn bag and they were burned.
So the official story was that Oliver North went rogue and did all this stuff behind the president's back with some help from a few other people in the government. For this, he was convicted of obstructing justice, destroying documents, and accepting bribes, for which he served a total of 0 days in prison because he got off on a technicality. But again, he didn't do all this by himself, so what happened to the rest of the gang? Richard Secord and his business partner, Albert Hakim, each got 2 years. Probation.
Oh,
What effect do you believe that these highly publicized...
this is insane, because if this is anyone who wasn't connected to the government at this point, you know they're getting, what, life, without a doubt. Yet all these people are getting let off so lightly.
proceedings will have on the willingness of foreign countries and individuals to cooperate with the United States on proper covert operations in the future.
In my opinion, the whole world is laughing at us.
The Secretary of State, Secretary of Defense, National Security Advisor, and 2 CIA members were all pardoned by George Bush Sr. once he got into office. So pretty much everyone involved got off with a slap on the wrist at worst. Oh, actually that's not true. There was one person who got punished pretty badly. Mehdi Hashemi, the guy who leaked the Iran arms sale story to the Lebanese press, he was executed for treason. But yeah, this was basically the biggest scandal in American history, and everyone got away with it. And
That's kind of
nobody
crazy.
gives a shit to this day.
I'd never heard about it before, to be honest. I didn't hear about this in my life, to be fair. And of course, the UK were involved at some point in this whole story. But but yeah, hopefully you enjoyed this reaction. And yeah, until next time, like, subscribe, and peace.